Story is at the core of us as human beings. It is one of the easiest ways to create connection with your potential ideal collectors. There are two actual things that make it much more easy to connect on a deep basis. And those are the power of story and shared values. When we add those two things together, it creates a magnetic connection that draws in and attracts your ideal collectors. Remember, I said alignment is super important. Story and shared values are the way that you get in alignment with your ideal collectors. It's how they know they're in the right place and they're connecting with someone who is in alignment with what they care about. So story is fundamental to the process that we're going to be using. Story has a number of parts to it. And when we look at it on its most basic level, a story is a narrative. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It starts, it has action, and then it comes to completion. It can be simple or it can be complex. I think one of the things that holds people back at the very beginning as they start creating story, as they start writing and creating content for their collectors, their ideal audience, is that they feel like they have to write a whole lot. The truth is, it doesn't have to be the great American novel in order to create connection. It just has to be a story. You can simply create a story in one sentence, or you can make a more complex one that goes on for several pages. You need to find the length that works for you and for your audience. You'll be able to tell whether it's working for your audience by how they interact with it. Are they engaging with it? Are they reading it? Are they clicking through to your website? If it's not in alignment, if they're not connecting to it, they won't read it all. They'll drop off. Your reach will drop. The numbers will tell the story. So you don't have to wonder. You just have to keep up with those metrics that we talked about earlier that measure those key touch points. So your audience will tell you when your story is hitting or when it's missing. So don't feel like you have to write the great American novel. You just need to be you and share what is authentically you. Those stories can take on a number of different forms. Again, you're going to want to find the form that feels most comfortable to you. Some people are most comfortable telling visual stories, sometimes in the form even of slideshows. It can be images. You should always include one painting with each of your stories, whether it's a blog post, an email, things like that. But your story can also take written form, and it can be auditory. So story is not limited to just one format. Some audiences prefer one format over another, but again, you'll know that by testing different ones out and then referring to your metrics. Are they watching? Are they listening? Are they reading? Or are they dropping off? The numbers tell the actual story of their engagement as well. The key components of a story are the old journalistic questions: who, what, where, when, how, why, and how. So start with who, go to what, where, when, why, and how. If you do that in each and every story, you're going to make a story that's engaging. You're going to make a story that's going to hold people's attention. When you're looking at how to outline a story, the easiest way to create a story that's effective online is to use a hook. A hook is something that stops the scroll on social media, that has people open an email from the subject line. A hook is an attention-getting sentence. The hook is the thing that grabs the audience first and makes them stop and pay attention to you. Then comes the frame, where you get the context of what's going on. You're setting the stage. Think of it as an introduction. Then go through 3 points. Keep it super simple. It could be 3 sentences if you're talking about a painting, for example. And I have an example of a painting story for you to look at too, that we're going to go over in just a few minutes. But it can have 3 points and then come to a conclusion. The human mind is a funny thing. We are hardwired for story. And if we don't get the conclusion of the story, it is deeply troubling on a level that a lot of times we're not even aware of. We need the conclusion. We need the threads to come together in order to feel closure. And when we don't get closure, we feel uncomfortable. We feel unease. Make sure you always come to a close in whatever you're writing. Give it a conclusion. Then make a call to action. The call to action can be as simple as, if you enjoyed this, share it with a friend. If you really liked this, feel free to pass it on. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this. Have you ever had a similar experience? So ask a question that leads to an action. The reason calls to action are important is that they are small micro commitments. It gets your audience used to taking an action so that when it comes time to sell, they are not uncomfortable clicking a link to get more information about what you have to offer. So make sure you always include a call to action, whether it's a blog post, an email, or a social media post. It's the crucial thing at the end of each piece of content. We've all got core stories, and we're going to talk about 4 of them in this lesson. These are your 4 core stories that talk about you as an artist. And these 4 core stories are your painting why. Why do you paint? The second one is your painting origin. How did you get started? The third is your painting process. And the 4th is a description of your paintings. Now, yes, you can put all of this together in one mega document, but it's probably too much information. What is going to work better is for you to use these 4 core stories as the introduction for your audience to your world. So they will form your first 4 blog posts and emails. And you will use these, ideally, as you become more advanced, as part of your nurture sequence to introduce your world to your audience as they sign up to your email list. These are also great stories to share on a fairly regular basis on social media. As new people come into your world, they need to know who you are and why you do what you do. So we're going to talk about how to get started with writing these. One of the first exercises for this lesson is to open up a Google Doc and use voice to text to tell these stories to the computer. Because I found that it's a whole lot easier when you're telling stories to use voice to text. We have a tendency when we type to become very formal in our language. I want you to be very conversational, like you'd be writing a letter to a friend, not like you're writing a formal essay for an English 101 class. So I don't want you to get hung up on spelling or grammar, especially in this first draft. Open up a Google Doc for each of these stories, click voice to text, and just start talking. Don't overthink it, just tell it, because this is going to be your first rough draft. You can go back and edit these and polish them. Don't over polish, but you just need to get started. So right now, before you come back, I want you to go open those Google Docs, and I want you to tell your stories, one story per doc, into Google Docs. Use voice to text. It shouldn't take you super long. In fact, I'm going to challenge you to spend no more than 20 minutes on this so that you just get it done. It can be terrible, and that's okay. You just need that first draft done, because once you have something on paper, you can go back and tweak it. But getting that first draft done, that's the hardest part. So go open up Google Docs now, stop the video, create your core stories, and then come back. So now that you're back, did you really go do it? I hope you did. If not, do it at the end of the video. But these are your first 4 blog posts. You now have a month of content already done. You don't have to go create anything else. Your first month of content is done. High five, my friend. And you're going to be able to pull from those 4 stories for your social media post for the first month as well. We're going to talk about a special system I have for that in a later lesson in this module. But for right now, your content plan is underway. Now, the next thing that is going to make creating your content so that it's in alignment with your ideal collector a whole lot easier is going to be identifying your core value content categories. And hopefully some of these have come up as you told Google your stories. Value content categories are things that are both core values to you, that are reflected in your work. They're influences on your work. Think of them as passions that help inspire and drive your work. And they're ones that your ideal collectors will share. Not necessarily all of them, but at least 2 to 3 of them. So let me repeat that. What gets your collectors in line with you is that you all share at least 2 to 3 of those core value categories. That's going to be crucial for making sure you're going to find people who are as passionate about the things you care about as you are. Do you see how that creates alignment? So you're going to use these core categories in 2 different ways. First, they're going to help when you identify them and talk about them in your social media and in your blog posts and in your emails, because it will help draw your ideal collectors to you and know that they're in the right place. It's the honey, the bait that you throw out that pulls in, draws to you your ideal collectors, your potential ideal collectors. The second thing that we're going to do with that, we're actually going to do a whole lot with it, but the second main thing for this lesson is you're going to use hashtags that are associated with those core categories to help your ideal collectors find you more quickly. Those hashtags are outside of the art world. They're things that you care about, just like those core values are outside of the art world. They're things that you care about that inform your work, and they are things that your ideal collectors care about. They follow similar hashtags. This, again, is the breadcrumb trail that leads them back to you. So it's super important to identify those value content categories right now. And here's how I want you to do it. I want you to look at the workbook. I want you to list 8 or 10 things that you care about, that you value, and you're passionate about. Go beyond simple things like valuing trust. I want you to get to things, the next level. And I want you to list them out. Look back at your core stories because they're in there. Look at your painting why. It's in there. Look at your painting origin. It's in there. I promise. Don't overthink it. Only take a couple of minutes and just write down 8 to 10 things. Once you've written those 8 to 10 things down, Then I want you to circle the 4 or 5 that are also in alignment with your artwork. Not all of them that you wrote down on your 8 to 10 things are in alignment with your artwork. For example, one of the things I love and adore, everything horse. Horses, everything equine. I don't paint horses. They're not really a direct influence on my painting. So it's not one of my 4 to 5 categories that I talk about in my content that pulls my ideal collector in. So it's something I value, but it's not showing up in my work. So it would not go on my 4 to 5 that are in alignment with my artwork. For example, mine are nature in the natural world, environmental preservation and sustainability, Southern culture, the sense of place that comes from Southern culture, community. I love creating community. And obviously, landscape painting. You can always, and you should always, list your painting as one of your core content categories. So right now, circle those 4 to 5 that are in alignment with your artwork, and make sure you fill in those last 5 slots in the workbook and have nailed down your categories. Oops, got a typo here. I've got number 4 in 2 places. Here's how that works. Here's the sweet spot in the center. And this is where the value of value content categories comes in. Where these overlaps happen, these initial petals right here, they're interesting, but these initial overlaps are only overlapping between 2 categories. That's not necessarily going to create an ideal collector. But as soon as you start getting into that 3rd layer, you're getting some juicy overlap happening there between 3 categories. That's going to produce ideal collectors. When you get to interior ones where they share even more, you are getting to your raving fans. So that is how the value categories will help you create content that attracts your ideal collectors. Dive in, finish that workbook, and let's move on to the next lesson.